History isn't always about the huge battles or the famous monuments. Sometimes the most incredible stories are tucked away in a simple, forgotten file, just full of handwritten notes and dusty old stamps. Well, today we're opening one of those files. We're going to uncover a story about freedom, about property, and a man's search for justice.
All right, let's get into it. It all kicks off with this pretty unassuming piece of paper that was filed in Washington, D.C. way back in 1872. It's a claim for a horse taken in Arkansas, valued at $150. On the surface, it's just a piece of government paperwork, but, the real story is always in the detail.
And when you look closer at the deposition, you see the claimant's name, Talton Hardin. But right next to it, there's this little handwritten note that changes everything. It says cold, which was short for colored. The man filing this claim against the United States government was a formerly enslaved man. And that just brings up this huge question, right? Here's a man only a few years out of slavery, and he's using the very system that once held him in bondage to demand what's his. Could he actually pull it off? Could he make his case to a government that for most of his life didn't even see him as a full person? To really get what an uphill battle this was, we've got to understand the man himself and what this horse really truly meant to him. See, this wasn't just a farm animal to him. In his own words, straight from his deposition, Talton says, "I had bought this horse to ride to see my wife who lived 10 miles from my boss's place." His boss' place, his old boss's place, his former enslaver's plantation. This horse, it was freedom. It was his ticket to see his family, who were scattered after the war. It meant everything, and he put a price on that freedom, $150. You have to remember, in the 1870s, for a man working as a hauler and a blacksmith, literally building a life from nothing, that was a huge amount of money. It was everything he'd worked for. It was his property, his new life as a free man. But here's the catch. He couldn't just ask for the money. His claim was filed with something called the Southern Claims Commission. This was set up to pay back Southerners whose stuff was taken by the Union Army. And to even get your foot in the door, you had to clear one massive hurdle. He had to prove, without a doubt, that he was a loyal Union supporter through the entire war. And man, his testimony, it's powerful. He declared under oath, "My sympathies were with the Union cause. I had learned that our freedom depended on its success." He's flat out saying, of course I was for the Union. My freedom depended on it. But in a system that was, let's be honest, deeply skeptical of a black man's testimony, his word, no matter how powerful, it just wasn't going to be enough. He had to build a case, and for that, he was going to need some help. I mean, just think about that for a second. How does a black man in post-war Arkansas prove not only that his horse was stolen, but that his heart was in the right place during the war? How do you prove that to the federal government? Well, the answer, it turns out, was his community. This is where his friends, Albert Gratchue and John Thomas, both formerly enslaved men themselves, stepped up. They gave their own detailed depositions. They swore to his character, they swore he owned the horse, and they swore he was a Union man, putting their own reputations on the line to back him up. But then comes the most jaw-dropping testimony in the entire file. It's from a guy named T.H. Hardin. Yep, same last name. This was Talton's former enslaver. And he testified under oath that Talton was a man of avowed Union sympathies who never aided the Confederate government in any manner. The very man who once owned Talton was now vouching for his integrity. Incredible. And check this out. When it came to the horse's value, everyone was pretty much on the same page. Talton said $150. His friend, John Thomas, said about $150. Albert Gratchue put it somewhere between $120 and $130. Even his former enslaver, who gave the lowest estimate at $100, confirmed it was a valuable horse. The case was looking pretty strong. So, the case is built. His loyalty is backed up by a chorus of witnesses, including, amazingly, his former master. The value of his horse is corroborated. The file is complete. Now, It was time for the government to make its decision. The special commissioner down in Arkansas went through all the testimonies, all the sworn statements. He wrote up his final notes and sent the whole package off to Washington, D.C. for the final judgment. Now remember, this is the amount Talton Hardin was asking for, the fair market value of his horse, the price of his connection to his wife, his symbol of hard-won freedom. And this is what the government decided to give him? $60. Yeah, less than half of what he asked for, and way less than even the lowest estimate from his witnesses. So what happened? Why so low? Well, the answer is buried in the commissioner's notes. He basically said, yeah, the horse was valuable, but he was more focused on what Talton had actually paid for it so far. Turns out, Talton bought the horse for $35, but was still paying it off. The commissioner figured he'd only paid about $14 in money and an old saddle, so they didn't pay him for the horse's market value, they just paid him back for his investment. So was it a win or a loss? It's complicated, right? He definitely didn't get what the horse was worth, but the fact that he got anything at all, well, that's what makes this one man's fight so important. Because this one little claim file, it's like a microcosm of that whole chaotic period after the Civil War. It shows the real, on-the-ground fight for Black citizenship and the right to own property. It shines a light on the huge economic challenges these folks faced. It proves the power of a community that stands together. And more than anything, it's a testament to the sheer guts it took to demand justice from a system that was far from perfect. And in the end, this is what it all came down to. A payment voucher issued by the Treasury Department. On March 26, 1875, the United States government officially paid $60 to Talton Hardin. The case was closed. He took on the system, and he got a partial victory, a real monetary acknowledgement of his loss, and a confirmation of his right as a citizen to be heard. Talton Hardin's story survives only because this file survived. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other stories just like this, stories of quiet courage, of dignity, of fighting for what's right, are still out there, just waiting in a box, on a shelf, somewhere in an archive for someone to find them.